This video is brought to you by the No Fear community.
People have preconceived notion, many people have preconceived notion about what the emerging markets can and cannot do. And based on what I understand you have done, some of those might not be completely correct. Can you tell us a little bit more about the emerging market, working in the emerging markets today and in the future?
So I think that's a very interesting question, but I would actually turn the question around a little bit, and I would almost suggest to you that emerging markets is such a broad term. I'm going to take the approach that you cannot really generalize about what emerging markets can do or what so-called developed markets can or cannot do. And for better or for worse, we live in an environment where there's a global component and there's a local and individual component. And there is a section of the population globally, including in the emerging markets, that really are in the same sphere that most of the developed markets are. In other words, they have access to the same resources, they have access to the same technologies, they all have access to the internet the same way we do, and that environment is very transferable today. So it's not unusual for organizations today to staff from folks globally, given that they have access to the same resources and they can actually have several things in common. So what I would like to suggest is there are capabilities in the emerging markets, and quote unquote what I think we're referring to as the emerging markets, that are probably going to continue to evolve as individuals in those societies are plugged into the global marketplace. There are also opportunities for those of us in the developed markets to tailor our solutions, everything from the entertainment industry through to traditional manufacturing and technology, etc., for the quote-unquote emerging markets. And hopefully it will, if you want to be an optimist, it will over time lead to better outcomes for both of us. The counterbalance, of course, is in today's global environment, given the resources that an individual has, there's always a retention challenge for a lot of organizations as well. So I think balancing those two will be a continuing challenge.
With all those benefits of that organizational transformation and new approaches can bring, why do you think not more organizations acting quickly? What are the key obstacles that you have observed?
That's a very good question. I think there is naturally a predisposition to what I call inertia or the status quo. And that's also something that it's unclear to me how that's going to change in the next year or decade or 2 decades. People, if something works today, or they believe it works today, the mentality of constantly looking for self-improvement doesn't always exist. And we see the end results. We see some companies that succeed and that succeed on a regular basis, and we see publicly companies that haven't always succeeded as much. So I think as these concepts continue to spread, as people are aware that standing still is no longer an option. Even if it works for you today, it is no longer an option. And as that message permeates more broadly, then we will see more individuals and companies embracing this in a broader way.
Look at the couple of the countries you've worked in, Canada, India, the US, Latin America, I think. There's areas that have different expectation of their leaders. What are the couple of things you would advise people that are leading international organizations today to keep in mind when working in different areas of the world?
So there's that global corporate component where there actually needs to be a cohesive culture regardless of where your employees are based. So your employees could be based in Asia and Africa and Europe, anywhere in the Americas, and there needs to be a cohesion globally of that corporate culture, and that's not easy to do. There is always that right mix between having, mixing people globally in order to achieve that, and also having that strong vision laid out by the senior management. That's one component, and there's always a localization component as well. So being very conscious that there needs to be a global cohesive corporate culture, at the same time a local component to the culture, and being conscious of where those lines should be drawn is very, very important for a company to be cohesive globally. And there are practical things that companies do, I think, to keep that. They keep that going, and it's become easier in today's environment. So there's obviously moving people physically from one place to another, or having people physically visit different places. That can never be substituted with all the technology we have today. So that will need to continue to happen. Second, it's actually having the vision very clearly laid out, as I mentioned just a few seconds ago, and observing and incorporating reactions to that vision from the entire global pool for that organization.
So listening and engaging with the front line globally becomes one of the key attributes of success.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Ravi, before we finish this discussion, thinking about the No Fear community of current leaders and of future leaders, what are the key words of advice you want to give them on their journey to managing themselves and their organizations?
So I think just reiterating some of the themes we talked about earlier, one, as the theme of this conference, is no fear. I think having no fear doesn't mean just plunge without thinking. So there still needs to be an analytical and very objective approach. But once that is done, then make calculated risks that you believe will lead to outcomes that you expect. So focus on that. Then second, never ever give up on self-improvement. Never assume that you've done something in the best possible way you have, because there's always room for improvement, and keep looking for that. That mental exercise of just looking for improvement, even in scenarios where there may be limited to no improvement. Just that mental exercise is something that will keep our brains sharp and will allow us to be successful in a more consistent way over time.
This video is brought to you by the No Fear community.